One team that isn't in crisis is Arsenal. 1-0 to the Arsenal again. Win at Fulham at the weekend. Another set piece. Top of the league. Favourites to win the title. What can go wrong, James?
Well, the way that they're going about it is it's fine margins, isn't it? I mean, if you're going to play this way, then you do leave yourself vulnerable to a wonder strike, a big mistake, a refereeing error. If you're not able to go and close these games out, 2, 3, 4, and make it that comfortable, then that's the flip side of it. But look, I mean, I guess if you spin this into a positive for Arsenal, I mean, they're not playing particularly well and they're winning, and that is something that they've not been able to do in previous seasons. Last year they drew 14 games, and a lot of those games they'll feel like they should have won and they weren't quite there, or just again fine margins didn't go their way. This time, because they're defensively, it's almost ridiculous how organised and disciplined they are. After Leandro Trossard's goal, which was early in the second half, 55 minutes, I think it was, Fulham didn't have a shot. They had one shot in the final 35 minutes of that game. One shot. And that was blocked. We're not talking about a team that's hanging on. I mean, it's the level of control they have. It is remarkable, but it's not aligned to killing games off, in terms of adding that second, third or fourth goal. Now, they will say there's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, Martin Odegaard's out injured. He is the player who stitches it all together. They are not as fluid in possession when he's not there. That's a fact. The second is that Victor Gyökeres is in the middle of a goal drought. And, he's now gone 9 games for club and country without scoring. He had 3 good chances at Craven Cottage, 2 really good ones, actually. 1 in each half when he got sent through. 1, he tested the goalkeeper. The second, he blazed over the bar. And you do sort of think, well, okay, if he starts taking 1 or 2 of these chances on a day when earlier in it, Manchester City beat Everton with Erling Haaland extending his own ridiculous goal-scoring form, there's an awkward comparison there. That City on the one hand have got this goal machine who's making the difference in games, whereas Arsenal have signed a striker, not suggesting that Gyökeres is at Haaland's level, but he was at a goal a game for 3 years in Portugal, and everybody thought he could hit the ground running in England, and he hasn't done that. And now Arsenal are having to find different ways to win games because their centre forward is not producing anything like the numbers that Haaland is. Now, of course, they're relying on set pieces, and while it's not necessarily great to watch, the Arsenal fans don't care. This is a club that has a mural of a set piece coach outside its stadium. Okay, they don't care. They're happy to wear this with pride. They sing set piece, ole, ole. It's one of those things that they want to win their first league in 22 years. They do not care how it comes. And if the set pieces and the defensive resilience is the cornerstone of what they're doing, then they're hoping that the free-flowing football and the goals are going to come later. I think the worry for the rest of the Premier League is that if Arsenal do get into stride and they can keep the injuries to a minimum, I think they've got the best squad and they're going to be very difficult to stop. But it's still, we go back to that point about Arteta. Will he just release the handbrake a little bit, let them play, let them go and kill games off? Or will he insist on that kind of defensive resilience, and eventually they get found out, they do concede late, a penalty call goes against them and they drop points and they let the other teams back in? That's what we're going to have to watch over the next sort of weeks and months.
Are we all not being a bit harsh on Arsenal? I mean, not just us, but everybody. Just the sense that I think we've been spoiled in recent years. Liverpool played fantastic football to win their 2 titles. We've had Man City have played amazing football under Pep, and I think we're kind of expecting champions now not only to be winners but also win with flair. I mean, we remember, the George Graham Arsenal, 1-0 to the Arsenal, go a goal up, defend for your lives, win the game. Chelsea and the Jose Mourinho would often do that, go a goal up, park the bus. I mean, I remember some of the title wins under Sir Alex Ferguson at Man United. They were pretty boring, to be honest, but they would take the lead and shut up shop. So maybe Arsenal are doing the defensive side of the game better than anybody else. And I think they probably earn the right to play that way. And I think the game's changing, and they're ahead of the curve in the way the game has changed. It's going more direct. Arsenal have been doing that for a good 18 months, 2 years now. So, I mean, I'll ask both of you, obviously, James, and then Beth, because Beth has watched the champagne football at Anfield in recent seasons. Are we being a bit unfair on Arsenal?
I mean, yes, because of their history. I think on the one hand, you'd say, look, this is a team that is desperate to win major honours. They've finished second for the last 3 years. And when they do their internal analysis, they look at what went wrong. They look at the mistakes that they've made, both in terms of leaving the squad short with injuries, red cards they suffered last season, the lack of finishing in front of goal that obviously they try to rectify by bolstering their attacking positions. They look at those things and they think, well, these are marginal gains. These are areas where we can just slightly turn the dial and make the difference. And they come from a position of, we control everything we can control and the variables are reduced. We suffocate the opposition and we find a way to win. And look, I mean, it's not the most dynamic football, but honestly, no one in North London, or the red half of it anyway, will care if it leads to their first title in 22 years. You can argue, of course, that there is an obligation if you spend over £1 billion, as Arsenal have now done under Arteta in his 5.5, almost 6 years there, that there is an obligation to play the right way. And this is probably a separate argument. Do the best teams, the biggest teams in the world, and I'm talking about, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Man United, Liverpool, is there an obligation for those teams to entertain as much as there is to win? And you'd say for the serial winners, for the teams that are winning Champions Leagues every year, or La Liga, or Premier Leagues, the Manchester City side, of their pomp under Pep Guardiola, that maybe there is, but I'm not sure that applies to a team that hasn't won it in 2 decades. I think they've got to do it any way they can. No one was saying to Leicester in 2016, well, it's quite counter-attacking, it's not really great to watch, lads. I mean, it's it was a fairy tale story. Arsenal is not a fairy tale story because they've spent a huge amount of money and they're obviously a much bigger club. But winning is everything to them, and if they can get over the line doing it, then more power to them.
Yeah, I mean, just before bring you in, Beth, I mean, you're right. I mean, I remember it was so tedious to listen to Arsenal fans or commentators saying that the team of Mesut Ozil, Santi Cazorla, Jack Wilshere was the best team they've ever seen, but never won anything. So I'm sure the Arsenal fans would much rather take this team than that team because they're winning games. But Beth, obviously, Liverpool's 2 titles have been won, in spectacular fashion. So do you think there has to be an element of style with a success, or is it just a case of just get it over the line and win?
I think for Arsenal and for Arteta, it's just about getting it over the line at the moment. And listen, the public might say that it's boring to watch, the neutral might say it's boring to watch, but that ultimately is none of Arsenal's concern. It's none of Arsenal's business. If it's boring to watch, but they win the title, they won't care a jot. So, yeah, I think if Liverpool, or I think if Manchester United perhaps brought in a coach who was trying to play in that way where it was more defensive minded, I think there probably would be a few grumblings from the fan base, just because that's not what they're used to. But I think for Arsenal, I completely agree with James. They've come so close now 3 times, 3 seasons in a row. I think that first season when they were going toe to toe with Manchester City, they probably played the best, what you call the best football in terms of, from a neutral perspective. They were really fun to watch. But ultimately they lost out on the title. So, maybe if they win it this year and then next year, they're still sort of playing in the same way, there might be a few frustrations from Arsenal fans saying, right, now we really want to see what this team can do. But I think Liverpool would love a boring game. Liverpool would love to be boring at the minute. As things are, Liverpool are needing 2 or 3 goals to win a game. And that just isn't always sustainable, particularly when, your front players aren't firing. So if you can win games 1-0 and 1-0 your way to a title, then all power to you. And I think, Arsenal deserve enormous credit for how resilient they are defensively. And I think that is why they are deservedly favourites to win the league.
Well, that's the Premier League title race wrapped up. Next, we're going to be talking about a man who's no longer in the Premier League, Ange Postecoglou.